Hello everybody, and welcome back to my channel. It's Abby here with another video for you. I just wanted to start by saying a massive thank you to all my new subscribers, well, any subscribers. It means an awful lot to me. This is obviously something I'm quite new at, so I'm trying, and any suggestions are always welcome. And I will do my best to keep going and improve. So any suggestions would be very, very, very welcome. I just wanted to share with you the news that I graduated on Wednesday. I graduated with a first class honours degree in health and social care. So it made all the hard work worth it. I had a lovely day at Worcester Cathedral with my family, and my dad made the effort to come as well, which is fantastic. He's lived abroad for the last 10 years and has now moved back to the UK, so for me that's lovely that I can have him at these special occasions. I unfortunately lost my mum about 21 years ago, coming up to 21 years ago, so for me it's special to have my dad there and all my family, obviously, to share these important times. So I wanted to just share a photo of my graduation, because being in the cap and gown kind of validates all those years of hard work. And for anybody out there currently studying, stick with it, because it's worth it. It is. It really is. And no one can take it away from you when you've got it. So yeah, and just enjoy the day. That's what I'd say. So anyway, it's enough of that. And so today I'm going to do another reading from an academic textbook which helped me tremendously throughout my degree, and lots of our assignments included it as a topic, something that we had to focus on, as obviously it's essential for any healthcare practitioner and any healthcare practice, and it is evidence-based practice. So this book is nice and simple, which helped me enormously. It's called A Beginner's Guide to Evidence-Based Practice, and it's by Helen Aviard and Pam Sharp, and they write nice and simply. Like I said, it's a nice, clear, easy book to navigate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the camera angle, and I'm going to do a little bit of a reading from this book, and hopefully you'll find it useful. Okay, so I'm going to do a little reading from this book for you today. Okay, so we're going to start with chapter 1, and it's called What is Evidence-Based Practice? And there's an overview of the chapter, and it says, defining evidence-based practice, exploring the components of evidence-based practice, consequences of not taking an evidence-based approach, what does evidence-based practice mean to me? In summary, key points and quiz questions. Okay, and there's a nice simple kind of definition here. Okay, and it says, put simply, evidence-based practice is practice that is supported by the best available evidence. It's quite simple, isn't it? Taking into account the patient's or client's preferences and using your own judgment. If we practice an evidence-based approach, then we are set to give the best care possible. Okay? And then it says, Sounds complicated? It's not really. Just read on. Evidence-based practice starts with the following principles. Have evidence-informed reasons for your practice decisions and the care provided. If you are a student starting out on a course in any of the health and social care professions, you are likely to be well aware of the need to be able to explain the care that you give, both in practice and in the assignments you write. This is because patients and clients expect you, even as a student, to understand why you are caring for them in a particular way, and to explain the reasons, which should usually be based on the best available evidence for the care you provide. This becomes increasingly important as you gain experience and become the one who is planning care and making decisions relating to care, rather than acting in a more supportive role. In fact, being able to explain a good rationale for practice decisions and planning care is something that distinguishes registered health and social care practitioners from others in a wide variety of assistant and supporting roles. If you are a registered practitioner, you may feel that you cannot always give a thorough rationale for your practice, and fear that your practice may not be as up-to-date as it could be, which can make you feel vulnerable or underconfident. You may not be able to access professional development opportunities, or you may be about to recommence your studies and want to find out how to use evidence in your academic work. You may increasingly be delegating care delivery to others, and you need to be able to justify what you are asking others to do. If you are a practice assessor or mentor, supervising learners, or a practitioner who is returning to work or study after a career break, you are likely to be even more aware of this need. You may feel you lack the skills to act as a role model for best practice and lack confidence in giving your reasons for your practice to others. A vital part of evidence-based practice is being able to explain the care that you give. In most cases, this involves referring to the best available evidence. And there's an example there, which I'm not going to read out. Okay. But if you do buy the book, it's quite interesting to read those examples. I'm just going to have a quick drink of tea, bear with me. You will see from these simple examples that as a student or registered member of staff, it is essential that you can provide a clear rationale for the care you give. You need to be able to tell the patient, client, student why an intervention or procedure is required, and be able to provide a clear rationale. This is a part of evidence-based practice. But providing a rationale alone is not enough. Being able to provide a clear rationale for the care you give is essential but not quite sufficient. An evidence-based approach requires that we ensure our rationale is not only clear but also up to date and based on the best available evidence. In other words, you need to be able to defend your practice and ensure you have a good rationale for the actions you have taken. Wherever possible, your rationale should be based on the best possible evidence, although what we mean by evidence is very broadly defined and will be different in varying circumstances. There are lots of different types of evidence that we can draw on to underpin practice, and we will discuss these throughout this book. Often the best practice will be research studies. Often the best evidence will be research studies, or better still, a review of all research studies undertaken in an area, often referred to as a review or systematic review. Look again at the example above about social work student on placements and the advice given to the family with the child who had the behavioural problems. The multidisciplinary team knew about the provision of groups that might help the parents cope with the behaviour of the child. However, this alone is not enough. Where public resources and services are limited, we need to be as sure as possible that a support group is likely to be useful and effective if made available to the parents. We need to make sure that the evidence or rationale for the care we provide is robust. In this case, the social worker explained her rationale to the student. This rationale was based on a large review of many different research studies that had evaluated the impact of parenting groups for children with behavioural difficulties. A review of research studies is usually referred to as a literature review or systematic review. The conclusion of this review showed that the vast majority of research had identified that the provision of parenting classes was beneficial to both the subsequent behaviour of the child and the stress and anxiety of the family unit. Defining evidence-based practice. Evidence-based practice is not just about evidence. David Sackett, founder of the NHS Research and Development Centre for Evidence-Based Medicine in Oxford, and his colleagues defined evidence-based practice as follows. Evidence-based practice is the conscientious and judicious use of current best evidence in conjunction with clinical expertise and patient values to guide health and social care decisions. There are many definitions of evidence-based practice, yet the definitions are all broadly similar. Sackett and colleagues emphasised the strong link between evidence-based practice and the decisions we make in our everyday practice. Decisions should be clearly stated and well thought out, judicious, and use evidence sensibly and carefully. They also emphasise the role of professional judgment and patient-client preference. The other components of evidence-based practice that will be explored further later in this chapter. Evidence alone is not enough. It should be supplemented with the judgment of the practitioner and the wishes of the patient or client. This was echoed by Dawes et al. In the Sicily Statement, in which the role of both tactic and explicit knowledge of healthcare professionals is emphasised in addition to the views of the patient or client. Evidence-based practice requires that decisions about health and social care are based on the best available, current, valid and relevant evidence. These decisions should be made by those receiving care, informed by the tactic and explicit knowledge of those providing care, within the context of available resources. A recent definition by Millink and Feinout-Overholt, 2014, emphasises the link between evidence-based practice and problem-solving. They state that evidence-based practice is lifelong problem-solving approach to clinical practice that integrates a systematic search for as well as critical appraisal and synthesis of the most relevant and best research, i.e. external evidence, to answer a burning clinical question. One's own clinical expertise, which includes internal evidence generated from outcome management or quality improvement projects, a thorough patient assessment and evaluation and use of available resources necessary to achieve patient outcomes, patient preferences and values. In order to emphasise the role of professional judgment and patient or client preference within evidence-based practice, other terms have emerged. Nevo and Slolmin-Nevo adopt the term evidence-informed practice and emphasise that the principles of evidence and professional judgment should be central to our approach to client or patient care. Thus, they argue that evidence-informed practice should be understood as excluding non-scientific prejudices and superstitions, but also as leaving ample room for clinical expertise, as well as the constructive and imaginative judgments of practitioners and clients who are in constant interaction and dialogue with one another. Many commentators, such as Woodbury and, excuse my pronunciation, Konicki, 2014, and Miles and Lachlan, 2011, argue for the need for a person-centred approach to care delivery. Miles and Lachlan emphasise that personal personalised models of care should be informed by, but not based on, evidence. A person-centred approach to care delivery is also the basis of the concept of values-based practice. Fulford et al. In 2012 describe how evidence-based treatment possibilities should be in tune with the values of the particular patient or client in the prevailing circumstances. They further describe value-based practice incorporating 4 clinical skills: awareness, reasoning, knowledge, and communication. Where do you think the balance should lie between the health and social care provider making a decision and that decision being made by those in receipt of care? Which is obviously an age-old issue, isn't it? We all want to have choices in our care, but we also rely heavily on the professional's judgment. Difficult for professionals, I think. Different terminology used. We have defined evidence-based practice as we understand it. However, there are many different terms that refer to the broader concept of evidence-based practice or evidence-informed practice. Among others, these include evidence-based medicine, research-based practice, evidence-based nursing, evidence-based physiotherapy, evidence-based dietetics, evidence-based midwifery, evidence-based occupational therapy. If you were to study the exact components of each of these, you might find slight variations in emphasis in the definitions, but you would find a general agreement that all definitions include use of evidence combined with professional opinion and patient or client's preference. We would argue that despite differences in nuance, these terms share the same overriding philosophy. Exploring the components of evidence-based practice. There are 3 main components of evidence-based practice: use of evidence, clinical or professional judgment, client-patient preference. Let us now look at each of these ideas in turn. Use of evidence. We have shown in the examples above how practitioners have used evidence to justify the rationale for the care they provide, and how evidence is a central component of evidence-based practice. We need evidence, and we should seek the best available evidence. In Chapter 6, we discuss how you can tell if the evidence is strong or not. What has changed in recent years is the acknowledgement that the term evidence is quite broad, and you could be looking at many diverse sources of evidence and other information to justify your practice. We will discuss the type of evidence you might come across in detail in Chapter 4, but in summary, the term evidence might come across, does not simply refer to research done in a laboratory under strict, controlled conditions. Different types of research provide evidence depending on the situation. Although the best evidence for our professional practice is usually some type of research evidence, if it is available. Consider how you would value the findings of a well-conducted piece of research that compared different ways of quitting smoking to an anecdotal account from one person who had tried to quit and had failed to do so. You can usually recognise a piece of research by where it is published and the way it is presented. Research is usually written up in a paper, published in one of the professional journals. Professional journals such as Addiction, Journal of Advanced Nursing, and Journal of Social, Behavioural and Health Sciences are often considered to be the gold standard of professional information because the material has been peer-reviewed and checked before acceptance for publication. A research study usually starts with a question called the research question, or clear aims or a hypothesis, which the researchers then seek to answer or investigate using a method that is clearly stated in the research paper, followed by the results or findings, and then a discussion of what these results are likely to mean. Ideally, we would not rely on a single research study, but a review study, sometimes called a literature review or a systematic review. A review of evidence provides stronger evidence than a single study because identifying the whole range of studies about a topic will prove more reliable than the results of just one, which might be misleading or provide an inaccurate picture. The study referred to earlier by Barlow is an example of a systematic review. The term systematic refers to a review of the literature or evidence that has been carried out in a systematic and rigorous way, and such reviews generally provide high quality evidence. The most widely known systematic reviews are those produced by the Cochrane and Campbell collaborations, which we refer to later in this book. If you come across a review published by either the Cochrane or Campbell collaboration, then you have probably located evidence of good quality. If there are no systematic reviews or literature reviews on the topic you are interested in, then the next best thing is to find a research study or several studies on your topic. The types of study you are looking for will depend on the focus or question you wish to address. The different types of research will be discussed in Chapter 4. There are many different approaches to research, and we will consider these later. it is important to emphasise that different types of research are required depending on what you want to find out. It is not helpful to say one type of research is better than another. However, it is possible and necessary to make a judgment about the quality of the research and whether it has been carried out well or not. We will discuss how to do this in Chapter 6. It is sometimes the case that there is insufficient research evidence upon which to base practice, or the research evidence you come across is inconclusive or of poor quality. There might be a lack of evidence because it would be unethical to undertake research in the particular area you are interested in. It may also be the case that there is research, but it does not directly apply to your particular area or your particular patient or client situation, and you need to use your professional judgment as to whether the research can be applied in the context in which you are working. There will also be times when you need to draw on alternative sources of evidence other than research evidence alone. However, it is important to note that it is research that often, but not always, provides the strongest evidence upon which we base our practice, and it is at the heart of evidence-based practice. However, research evidence alone is not enough for your practice. This is why the definitions of evidence-based practice include reference to your clinical professional judgment and patient or client preference. We will now address the former component of evidence-based practice. Clinical professional judgment and intuition. Our own professional or clinical judgment is vital for providing an evidence-based approach to care. In their early discussion of evidence-based practice, Sackett and colleagues, 1996, describe how evidence can inform decisions about practice, but cannot replace professional expertise and judgment. They argue that this clinical professional expertise is used to determine whether the available evidence should be applied to the individual patient-client at all, and if so, if it should be used to inform our decision-making. Professional or clinical judgment includes the assessment of alternatives. Thompson et al. In 2013 emphasise the importance of considering alternative courses of action and recognise the potential for harm when an inappropriate assessment is made. It is important that all the evidence we use is professionally evaluated, because every patient or client context is unique, and all clinical situations are to some degree uncertain. Standing 2014 describes how clinical judgment is informed by a range of evidence, from patient observation to published research studies. In emergencies, there may be a greater need for clinical or professional judgment, as there will be no time to gather the best available evidence, and our judgment will focus on how we can meet the immediate needs of the patient or client in front of us. When it is possible to plan care more thoroughly in advance, this should involve the writing of guidelines or protocols for emergency situations, and so the best available evidence will be used to inform care, and even in clinical and professional situations that require prompt decision making. Professional or clinical judgment may also be used alongside intuition. Intuition is often referred to as a gut feeling, just knowing. There appears to be a close relationship between experience and intuition. Intuition is grounded in both knowledge and experience in making judgments. That was by Benner, 1984, and Benner and Tanner, 1987. Standing 2014 argues that intuition can be useful when needing to make a clinical judgment in emergencies. Indeed, Benner and Tanner argued this back in 1987 when they described how intuitive knowledge and analytical reasoning are not opposed to each other. They can and do work together. Clinical professional judgment is also important if there is insufficient evidence, or the evidence does not refer to the specific patient client you are looking after. Thus, a judgment needs to be made as to how relevant the evidence we have is to the particular context, complexity, and individuality of the patient or client. Where there is no reliable research evidence, the judgment of the practitioner may form the best evidence. It is important to emphasize that intuition and experience are used in conjunction with an evidence-based approach. Intuition and/or pattern matching are useful aids to good clinical reasoning, but only when used as prompts to engage in analytical reasoning. That was by Ruth Sage, 2014. Using evidence without professional judgment can lead to formulaic care, while using professional judgment without available evidence can lead to the perpetuation of outdated practice. The two should work together. So far, we have argued that evidence-based practice requires more than raw evidence. It requires clinical or professional judgment. This may be based on intuition and/or experience, so that the evidence can be applied appropriately in practice. Now, let's look at patient-client preferences and what role they play in evidence-based practice. Patient-client preference. There is a third component. Using the patient's preference must be acknowledged and their informed consent sought before commencing any intervention. If all the best evidence and clinical or professional judgment pointed towards an intervention or therapy that the patient-client did not accept, then it ought not to be carried out. This concept is well established in English law. Discover what your professional body says about consent before undertaking care or an intervention. In addition, there has been a debate recently about the importance of shared decision-making and increased patient-client involvement in health and social care context. This is discussed further in Chapter 3. In legal terms, any care that is delivered without the patient-client's consent may be unlawful. Children under 16 cannot give their consent unless they are considered competent under the Fraser Guidelines. If the patient is temporarily in an emergency or permanently unable to consent, care for the patient-client should be delivered that is in their best interests. So there's a little bit there about the Mental Capacity Act, which I'm not going to read. That's something that I might cover in another video. It says, check you are fully aware of the principles regarding informed consent. There is some evidence to suggest that urgent care is sometimes delayed because practitioners are not aware that they can deliver care that is in the best interests of a patient or client who cannot consent. Some patients' clients really want to be involved in any decisions relating to their care. Others trust the practitioner to make the best possible decision on their behalf. This is a big responsibility, and we need to be well informed as to what might be the best option for our patient or client. There are many decision aids available to help patients who need to make treatment choices. The main point to remember is that patient preference must be considered when providing evidence-based care. While patients cannot demand care that is not available, equally, care cannot be delivered without their consent, and to do so would be to risk professional misconduct and be in breach of the law, unless the patient or client lacks the ability to consent. Duty of candour. With regards to patient-client involvement and adopting an open and honest approach, the Care Quality Commission's 2016 Regulation 20 discusses duty of candour and asserts that care providers should ensure openness and transparency with service users and their advocates. The Commission has identified specific requirements that must be followed when things go wrong with care and treatment, including providing truthful information, support, and apologising when things go wrong. Part of this is to ensure that both the risks and benefits of treatment, of care, are explained to the patient or client, which links very well with the notion of using evidence-based practice, particularly when we consider patient-client consent, their involvement and preferences. Consequences of not taking an evidence-based approach. Although delivery of the best possible care is the main driver behind evidence-based practice, there are consequences for you as a practitioner if you are not able to explain your care decisions, and these will now be discussed. There's a little example there. Accountability. In the example above, you would feel justified about considering a complaint against the practitioner who was not up to date or confident discussing current evidence. If you did make a complaint, the practitioner would then have to justify why this information was given. This would be difficult to do, if not impossible. As a health or social care practitioner, you are accountable to your manager or university, if you are a student, your professional organisation, and to the law. This means that you must be able to justify and give a clear account of the rationale for your practice. Failure to do this can result in professional misconduct. Students are accountable to their highest education institution, and when in practice ought to be supervised directly or indirectly by a registered practitioner. Registered practitioners are accountable to their professional body and their employers. We are all accountable to the law. You can see that when you are called to account for your practice, you will only be able to do so if you have administered care that is best based on the best available evidence. You will not be able to account for care that is based on weak or old evidence. Find out what your professional body, college, or association says about your accountability and evidence-based practice. In the United Kingdom, these are as follows. For allied health professionals and social workers, including occupational therapists, physiotherapists, operating department practitioners, dietitians, paramedics, radiographers, speech and language therapists, art therapists, chiropodist podiatrists, clinical scientists, orthoptics, prosthetists and orthotists, the Health and Care Professions Council, HCPC. The HCPC publishes standards of conduct, performance and ethics, and there's a website there for you. They state that you must keep your knowledge and skills up to date and relevant to your scope of practice throughout continuing professional development. For nurses and midwives, it is the Nursing and Midwifery Council, the NMC, and it publishes the Code Professional Standards of Practice and Behaviour for Nurses and Midwives. The Code requires all practitioners to practice in line with the best available evidence. In addition, nurses should make sure that any information or advice given is evidence-based, including information relating to using any healthcare products or services, and maintain the knowledge and skills you need for safe and effective practice. Therefore, if you are called upon to account for your practice, you must be able to provide a sound rationale for why you acted as you did. If you are only able to say, "I was told to do this," or "I've always done it this way," your practice will look very poor indeed. Students are expected to work towards these standards in order to obtain registration, and failure to do so may affect progression towards qualification. Individual colleagues and associations often produce professional guidance, and you should access their websites to see what relates to your own profession. Do you think the practitioner referred to earlier would be found guilty of professional misconduct owing to the misinformation she gave regarding childhood vaccinations? Now, we didn't read that example, but I would say yes to that definitely. So I'm going to leave it there now, because I think this reading's gone on for long enough, and we'll come back to it in another video. Like I say, it's a great book, and I thoroughly recommend purchasing it or having a look at it on your university library. Okay, thank you for joining me today, and I want to wish you all the best with your studies or your practice or whatever it is that you like to do, and I will hopefully see you all soon. Take care, my lovelies. Bye bye for now.